For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 72, printed in Part A of House Report number 118-559, offered by Ms. Jayapal of Washington.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1316, the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Jayapal, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My bipartisan amendment would prevent funding from this bill to be used to require the Defense Department to create what is called an unfunded priorities list. This list that DoD is required to send to Congress is simply a wish list of things that individual commanders and generals would like to fund. It has not gone through the level of prioritization and vetting that all of the other things that come in the budget do. In preparing the White House budget request, the Commander-in-Chief, in consultation with top military brass, determines what is necessary to defend the country based on a holistic analysis of our national security needs. By definition, anything that is in an unfunded priorities list has already been determined to be extraneous by the President, the Secretary of Defense, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This practice that wasn't even mandatory until the passage of the fiscal 17 NDAA does not serve the national security interests of the United States or the interests of our taxpayers. These wish lists are packed with billions of dollars of excessive line items, this year totaling more than $27.5 billion on top of the $850 billion requested by the White House and a 50% increase from last year. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this bipartisan and common sense amendment. And I want to thank my Republican colleagues, Congressman McClintock and Congressman Davidson, as well as Congressman Garamendi, who have joined me to rein in this wasteful spending that has no benefit to our national security. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
I rise to claim time in opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman from California claims the time in opposition. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Unfunded priority lists are an important tool to provide Congress with unfiltered information on what our military services and combatant commanders need. This has been the law of the land since fiscal year 2017. Unfunded priority lists give military services and the combatant commanders a direct channel to Congress, which allows Congress to make more informed decisions. I urge a no vote and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I yield a minute to my distinguished colleague from Minnesota, the ranking member, Betty McCollum.
The gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized.
I thank the gentlewoman for the time. Mr. Chair, I rise in support of my colleague's amendment. We should also be supporting funding for national security. But should any department or agency really get an opportunity to request additional funding that's outside of the President's request by any administration's request? Either all agencies should have the authority to do it, or none of them should. This should not be unique to the armed forces and the combatant commanders if it's such a good idea. The service chiefs, they appear before the committee each year to discuss how their budgets meet the needs included in the National Defense Strategy. Most of the battalion commanders also testify annually before the committee. Congress is able to assess with stringent oversight what we believe the country needs for its national security. Therefore, I ask my colleagues to support this amendment. And if this really is such a fabulous idea that we have these unfunded opportunity lists, then we should do it for the EPA. We should do it for the National Park Service. I could think of a lot of things that the American public would like to know about if this is such a good idea that aren't able to be funded in current time in a president's budget. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I understand that it's critical for Congress to engage with the Pentagon to accurately meet our country's national security needs. But we don't have to spend billions of dollars on wish lists and what-ifs to accomplish that. And I would just say that the ranking member is absolutely right. If this is such a great idea for this agency, let's do it for all the agencies. If it's not a great idea for all the agencies, we shouldn't be doing it for the Department of Defense. let's be clear. If military leaders want more funding for their wish lists, there is nothing in this amendment that would prevent DoD from supplying an unfunded priorities list to Congress, but this process should be optional, just as it was 8 years ago. On top of that, most combatant commanders already testify before Congress ahead of the appropriations process, so Congress can understand their needs without these wish lists that undercut the president's budget request. By law, individual generals and commanders are required to go around the commander-in-chief and military leadership to Congress to ask for superfluous line items that serve mainly to line the pockets of defense contractors. This is corruption, plain and simple. These lists get in the way of our military stated priorities. For example, the House passed NDAA authorized funding for some of the Army's unfunded priorities while making substantial cuts to the requested amounts for the Army's 3 largest accounts. This is despite Army Chief of Staff General Randy George specifically requesting that none of the Army's unfunded priorities displace anything on the Army's fiscal 25 budget request. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this sensible, bipartisan amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. All time for debate having expired, the question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Washington. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Washington
I ask for a recorded vote.
Recorded vote has been requested. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Washington will be postponed.